Yo, what is going on YouTube? I am Germ here, as you guys can see up on the screen. Today we are going to be talking about TSM Swordart. There's been so much talk about him specifically, but really about almost every single member on the TSM team and really the TSM roster as a whole. Obviously, being one of the most popular teams, they have a ton of fans, they have a ton of haters, and when they do really well, there's a ton of stories to talk about, and when they're doing not so well, especially now, which might be kind of like, honestly, one of the worst just positions overall that TSM has ever really been in as an organization, there's going to be a ton to talk about as well. So right now, a lot of people are talking about Swordart for a ton of different ways. I mean, when you sign a contract as big as him in the offseason, you're going to be under a magnifying glass, and really it's gotten certain people out there saying that potentially Swordart could end up being one of the worst League of Legends signings of all time. There is so much to talk about, so much to break down, so much to give thoughts and opinions on, so I think this will be a fun video that I do hope you guys enjoy. But before we get into that, I just want to mention a word from our sponsor of today's video real quick, which is Draft Buff. This is a fantasy esports website and app where you can play right now in the browser. You can download it on Google Play, you can download it in the App Store. They have this game mode called Draft Royale going on right now where you have a set budget of money and then you get to mix and match different rosters of players, which each player having their own like salary and cost to fit under the budget, and you can rack up as many points as you hopefully can. This is the roster I'm going with this week: Licorice, Santorin, Jensen, Deathly, Huhi, and Cloud9. So hopefully I'll be racking up some points. I'm 26 out of 107 in the league I'm in right now, and if you guys want to make your own team, if you want to rack up some points of your own, you think you can make better picks, definitely get signed up on Draft Buff today. There's going to be a link in the description down below. It's also going to be the pinned comment on this video. Play some Draft Royale, play some fantasy League of Legends, some LCS games. I would appreciate it so much, and so would they. Shout out to Draft Buff. With that being said, let's get right into this. So there was this tweet from Thorin that was kind of the inspiration for this video. Got me thinking. He said TSM are going for one of the worst dollar for dollar signings in League of Legends history, and we're not even talking about Huni in 2021. Now, I thought that was interesting. One, I'm not exactly sure how much Huni is making on TSM or if that is public. It's my understanding that Huni is not making that much on TSM. Now, maybe you could argue any amount of money he's making is too much if you don't even think he should be in the LCS, or if you think he's been really, really bad or whatever. But he's obviously talking about Swordart here, who is the highest paid player in the LCS, which is really, really interesting. And the crazy part is I don't completely disagree with Thorin here. You know, whatever you think about Thorin, if you think he's really smart, really dumb, has good takes, bad takes, should shut up, shouldn't talk about League of Legends, whatever, he at least has an interesting conversation starter here about could Swordart potentially be the worst signing in League of Legends history? Who have some of the other worst signings been? The League of Legends esports has been in a weird state the last couple of years where everyone's been saying it's in a bubble. Everyone's saying that salaries are way inflated, that salaries are way too crazy high, when pretty much every single team loses money year over year. There's not really even teams making a profit. TSM was one of the very, very few teams, and who knows if they even are anymore. This stuff changes so fast. Even though viewership has been increasing, sponsorships have been increasing, revenue's been increasing across the board, so has costs, and it has prevented these teams from ever making a profit. So for these salaries to keep going up and up and up the last couple of years has been absolutely insane. But then salaries really exploded this offseason. Seeing the amount of money that Perks was able to sign for, seeing the amount of money that Jensen was able to sign for, and then seeing that Swordart became the highest paid player in the league was just really, really crazy. I mean, these salaries are increasing exponentially, and I don't know if the revenue is necessarily there to support it. Yes, the investments are coming in to be able to support some of this stuff, but that's why that this can even be in the conversation for one of the worst signings of all time, because these are amounts of money that we have never really seen thrown around. So it's crazy. Just thinking back to some of maybe the bad signings over the years, again, they don't have the same weight because it wasn't just the same amounts of money, but I'm thinking like even as far as TSM goes, TSM had Mike Young for a little while. That was a big disaster. Bringing over Yellowstar was a big disaster. Bringing over Mithy, honestly, didn't even work out as well. So just even TSM themselves has had a fair amount of stuff. There was the Huni on Dignitas contract where Dignitas signed him for over $1 million. That was absolutely insane. I know there's been some other crazy contracts. I was trying to think of just some different ideas and everything, but those were some of the main ones that came to my mind. I want to say that did CLG give Rain over like some crazy contract or something like that where he really didn't work out with them? So we've seen some crazy stuff in the past, but again, as far as this amount of money, it's where it does present itself as maybe potentially being on another level. Now, yes, Swordart is a talented player, but so far he has not been working out. Yes, we are just 1 week into the LCS, so I would agree it is too early to be having this conversation. But what did we see TSM in the lock-in tournament? 7, 8 games, something like that. So if you put that all together, we've seen 10 or 11 games of TSM so far, which would normally be about 3/4 of the LCS spring split. Like we've seen almost this TSM team for 75% of the split at this point. So while yes, I get it, and yes, you can say that that's a preseason tournament, blah, 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 whatever. In most years, that would have been the start of the LCS season. It would have started that early, just like the LEC had already started and stuff. And were teams really not taking the lock-in tournament seriously? I don't know. You could argue either way, whatever you want to do, that's fine. But for TSM to go and throw that amount of money at this player, and for him individually to be looking as bad as he is, but also for the team overall. I mean, there's really two parts to this conversation. One is just, is Swordart good enough to warrant that kind of salary? He either is or he isn't. I would make an argument that so far he's obviously been nowhere near worth this amount of salary. Obviously, his play individually has not really looked that great so far. He also said he was going to come and help TSM become like an LPL team. That has not really happened so far. Right now, TSM is the slowest, least bloody, least exciting team in the league. And he's had weird plays. He's been missing skill shots. TSM has just looked like a mess, and he hasn't been like a bright spot in the team necessarily. Also, there's the argument of, he's laying in with Lost, and Lost is maybe the worst AD carry in the LCS, and that's dragging him down, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but he has had his fair share of like mechanical mistakes as well, which is interesting. And then there's the other argument of, TSM as a whole, does the signing make sense for them? Even if Swordart was good enough, even if he was worth the money, does it make sense? Does this TSM roster, should they be throwing around that amount of money? And I would argue probably not. So this is a team that lost Bjergsen, lost Doublelift, was changing out their top laner because they had to move on from Broken Blade to get another import slot. So they had an entirely new roster. They were only bringing back Spica. They were going to have a rookie head coach. They were going to have a rookie AD carry. They were going to have a big question mark in the top lane in Huni. Like, that whole roster, TSM was not necessarily set up to succeed this year. They needed a lot of things to go right. They needed Lost to be really, really good. They needed to hit on a rookie. That's insanely hard. The effectiveness rates of rookies, especially in their first split, especially in their first year, is really, really low. Just because a guy like Tactical was able to burst onto the scene and be really, really good right away, that is rare. That does not always happen. So they needed Lost to be good. They also needed Huni to be able to regain some, old version of himself. You thought that Swordart and Power of Evil would be a little bit safer, selections. But yeah, you needed Power of Evil to be able to come into TSM and successfully replace Bjergsen. You also needed Bjergsen, who is a rookie head coach, to be good at being a coach. Even though historically he's been a part of TSM for the last couple of years when TSM has had draft issues, and yes, you can blame that on some of the coaches, but players have a say in draft at the end of the day. So he has been a part of an organization who has had draft issues. He has been a part of an organization that has historically had gameplay issues. TSM has always been a slow, boring, unexciting team that has enough talent, but always plays below their kind of abilities and capabilities. And yes, maybe Bjergsen was, could argue that, hey, I'm going to get to focus on being a coach now. I can figure out how to get us play the best way. I can learn how to do drafts and everything. And that's fair, and I do believe that's possible, and it could happen eventually. But, old habits die hard. He's obviously been brought up in a system and a management and coaching staff and everything that has not been very good. So TSM needed a lot of things to go right. And for them to be spending all this money is kind of crazy, because it doesn't really make sense, because they're not Team Liquid, who was one player away from, being able to make it out of groups last year and maybe making it to a semifinals at Worlds or something like that. This is a team that was probably largely in a rebuilding mode, that sucks to hear, and that's not exactly exciting for fans or anything like that. But, if TSM a couple years ago with Prime Bjergsen, Prime Doublelift was going to go out and spend $3 million or $6 million or whatever, that makes a little bit more sense. The year after Bjergsen's gone, the year after Doublelift's gone, the year after you're kicking out your support, kicking out your top laner, that's when you want to go spend millions and millions of dollars. Like, that seems really, really risky to me. So not only has Swordart not been that good so far, there's a ton of time left. Maybe he works out. Maybe TSM just does an absolute 180. I think that's pretty unlikely at this point. I think it's much more realistic to expect that TSM is maybe just a middle-of-the-pack team until they start to make some big, big changes to the team. Because, yes, they have not looked good as a team. They have not been making team plays or anything like that. But even individually, every single lane and position has struggled to gain leads on their own. It looks like largely their players are just simply not good enough right now at the moment, and they just have so much to overcome. Yes, week to week you can maybe change some things, but there's only 5 weeks left in the spring split. It would be pretty insane to see them turn around too crazy and make huge improvements, because the other teams out there are going to be making improvements as well. Other teams are going to be practicing and scrimming and doing all this other stuff. So you can say give them time. All the other teams are getting that same amount of time. And TSM has not been an organization historically that has shown us that they have some system or infrastructure, coaching staff or whatever that does, performs better over the course of the season than some of these other teams and stuff. TSM, the history of them is they're a very, very talented team. Not that they're necessarily developing their own talent and stuff. So that is where we get into this conversation of, could Swordart potentially be, the worst signing in League of Legends history? It makes sense because North America has thrown around all this money. So that's, Europe has had some bad signing stuff before as well, but they've never been the big spenders that North America is. So that's when, you can start to bring some of these North American signings into that. So, I mean, if this season continues the way it's going for TSM right now, where they are struggling to win games against teams like CLG, teams that are really bottom of the LCS, and they keep getting stomped by the top teams. Like, yeah, they picked up a win against Cloud9 in the lock-in tournament. That's great, and that's nice. But then Cloud9 really ramped up as the tournament went on, and Cloud9 looks good to start this season. And TSM got stomped by 100 Thieves, and TSM just largely has not looked good. So not only has Swordart not looked great, but the team as a whole has not looked great. So there's the 2 different reasons why signing a guy for this amount of money, throwing this amount of money out there, really does not make sense. And I get the arguments that he's coming over to a new country, he needs to get acclimated, you need to give it time, blah, 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 blah. And I don't disagree, it could work out. But I'm just saying that Thorn brings up a good point, that this move could potentially, and right now it is on pace to go down as the worst League of Legends signing in history, which is really pretty crazy. Sad sign for TSM, sad sign for TSM fans, bad look for TSM management. They have had issues with general management of rosters, players, everything in the history in the past, and I think we're seeing some of that come to light once again. And honestly, I don't know what the answer is, because now TSM is in such a weird position where they have moved on from players who are now doing better elsewhere, Broken Blade, Treats, whatever. I mean, Tactical, Johnson. They've lost so much talent. Sven on Cloud9, Santorin, Sven Skaren, all these guys that have left TSM and are now doing so successful. They've burned so many bridges. They have, it's just not looking like a great place to be anymore. So it's going to be tough. But I did just want to make a video talking about the situation, because Thorin might be on to something here, as crazy as that sounds. But that is pretty much it for this video today, guys. Definitely drop a like if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about this situation? Do you think Swordart could potentially be one of the worst signings of all time? Do you have another signing you're thinking about? Do you think Swordart's going to work out in the end? We should give it some time. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on anything we talked about in today's video. Subscribe to stay updated on my latest content. Hopefully I catch you guys in the next one. But until then, peace.